May 2026, the Department of War opened a government UFO archive and immediately left behind a problem and a warning. The most interesting record in the first PURSUE files did not behave like a press release. It behaved like a helicopter crew had flown into the middle of a story that nobody in the room could explain. On May 8, 2026, the Department of War announced the first tranche of PURSUE UAP files. On May 22nd, a second tranche followed. The collection framed the records as unresolved, security-reviewed materials, not finished explanations. The government was releasing files, not answers. An efficient way to turn a website into homework. The cheap version would have been a greatest hits reel, fuzzy object, redacted page. And somehow I was staring at a PDF like the printer had whispered in Latin. The release was one case. A senior United States intelligence official got into a helicopter in late 2025 on a western United States test range. The mission was not to chase aliens. It was more practical, which was why it became stranger. People had reported orbs or lights over several nights. There had also been loud mountain thuds, like something had hit the ground. The crew went up to find debris or ordinary objects that might explain it. That was the first reason this file had teeth. The boring explanation was already in the helicopter. The official narrative described the witness as a senior United States intelligence officer traveling with another colleague and two pilots. They departed from a joint operations center and flew low through the mountains on a nap of the Earth route. They did find debris, but the debris did not explain the case. Several times, they spotted objects on the ground and descended for a closer look. Each time, the debris was old rockets or projectiles from years of weapons testing. The range already had normal weirdness, metal scraps, impacts, military leftovers. Then they found the cave. The ODNI narrative stated that as the crew continued near areas of reported orb activity, they discovered a large cave entrance with no visible end in sight. There was no safe landing spot. So the witness had the pilot orbit it several times. They marked the location and continued. Cave proved nothing. But it was the kind of detail that made the record feel less like a tidy UFO story and more like a night shift. That had started making everyone in the aircraft do quiet math. By that point, they were low on fuel. They dropped off one passenger with a ground team, refueled from a prepositioned tanker, and planned to return to base. Then the operations center radioed again. A ground team had spotted possible debris on a nearby mountain. The sun had set. The pilot switched to forward-looking infrared and night vision goggles. The senior official used his naked eye. That detail mattered too. This was not one person saying, "I saw a thing, trust me." The record moved between forward-looking infrared, night vision goggles, naked eye, ground teams, radar hits, operations center calls, and pilots trying to keep control while the night became theatrical. They searched the mountain and found nothing. As they started back, the operations center reported radar hits several miles uprange, where UAP activity had been reported on prior nights. So they turned to intercept. That was where the file stopped being interesting and became rude. En route, ground teams reported a UAP on forward-looking infrared. They described it as super hot, low to the ground, moving east and then south at high speed. Then the object split into two and changed direction. When the helicopter arrived, the crew scanned with night vision goggles, forward-looking infrared, and the naked eye. The ground team radioed that the object had risen from the ground, approached within 10 feet of the helicopter, dropped below them, then sped away. The pilots also reported something smaller emerging from the two objects before accelerating out of sight. The crew briefly pursued. Then they broke off because they could not match its speed. That sentence looked normal in a government document, but it should have bothered everyone reading it. A helicopter had been redirected by radar and ground observation toward a reported object. Then the chase ended because the aircraft could not keep up. That was where a lazy Mystery Channel would have started doing victory laps. That was not a joke. It was the exact trap the record did not earn. The file did not prove aliens, spacecraft, or secret technology. It proved that this particular official record was not satisfied by a shrug. Minutes later, the crew was directed to new radar detections and took up a hover at roughly 700 feet above ground level. In the distance, they saw countless orange orbs swarming in every direction against the mountain backdrop. The display lasted several minutes, then faded. Countless was doing a lot of work there. Not one light, not one misread star, not a single aircraft with an attitude problem. Countless orange orbs moving in all directions after fresh operations, center radar direction. Then the file delivered the image. The pilots and the senior official observed two large orbs flare up close to the helicopter, stationary, just above the rotor disc to the right. They were described as oval, orange, with a white or yellow center, emitting light in all directions. Then a third orb flared below the pair. Then a fourth. The group became 4 or 5 in a T formation, dimmed in reverse order, and vanished. The whole event lasted about 10 to 15 seconds. No photo. Before anyone yelled at the screen, the witness had explained why. He said he had been focused on assessing what it was and whether it posed a threat. The U.S. PURSUE statement added that many sightings had been above the helicopter, outside the forward-looking infrared camera angle. That was frustrating. It was also believable. Inside a helicopter at night with bright objects near the rotor disc, the first instinct probably would not have been, let me get content. It would have been, do we still have a rotor disc in 5 seconds? Then the fighter jets arrived. The operations center had told the crew that military aircraft were in the operating area on a training mission and asked for help identifying the UAP. The senior official saw the fighters at altitude by their blinking navigation lights. Then the same type of orbs appeared above them, flaring one at a time in a horizontal formation, matching the jet's speed and path. After 10 to 15 seconds, they dimmed and disappeared. The file stated that this repeated several times. The witness's comment was simple. It seemed like the same orbs were now chasing the fighters. That line was why this case deserved to go first. Not because it let anyone declare the answer. Because it gave the audience a clean sequence to remember: helicopter search, ground reports, radar hits, close approach, swarm, T formation, fighters, repeated formations. And the archive did not stop there. The Western United States event slides added pattern pressure around the same general story world. One slide described 3 teams of federal law enforcement special agents independently seeing orange orbs launch smaller red orbs in groups of 2 to 4 over 2 days. The larger orb appeared, released the smaller ones, and disappeared. The red orbs moved away, sometimes level, sometimes angled, sometimes swooping down. Another slide described a large, fiery orange orb near a rock pinnacle. Later, AARO measurements assessed it as farther away than the witness's first thought and between 12 and 18 meters in diameter. Yes, a serious file still reached for a pop culture shelf when the sky started improvising. A small helicopter cockpit, a glowing orange ball, essentially a fantasy villain's eye with no pupil. That did not make it true. It made it specific. Specific did not equal solved. But specific was where serious cases lived. Loose stories were easy to inflate or dismiss. Specific records made both sides work harder. So the boring explanations had to work. Could some of this have been drones? Yes, drones existed. They were a real national security problem, bright and confusing enough at night to give airspace managers a permanent eyelid twitch. But a drone explanation had homework. It had to explain the ground-level forward-looking infrared object, the split report, the near-helicopter pass, the swarm, the rotor disc flare-ups, the sequential dimming, the formations above fighter aircraft, and why the file remained unresolved. Could it have been flares? Maybe for some patterns in the lights. Flares could drift, brighten, fade, and create mischief. But flares did not usually behave like a coordinated object rising from ground level, approaching a helicopter, splitting, accelerating away, then matching fighter jet speed and path. If the answer was flares, the explanation had to do more than wave from the parking lot. Could it have been aircraft? Some of it could have been. The crew even spotted possible aircraft and later identified the fighters by their navigation lights. That mattered because the witnesses were not presented as people who thought every light was magic. The record showed them distinguishing aircraft from unknown objects. Could it have been sensor error? Some portion could have been. Thermal imagery and night vision goggles could mislead. Human eyesight could mislead. Distance at night was a professional liar. A test range was full of heat, movement, aircraft, equipment, and reflections. But the strongest part was the chain: ground teams, crew, naked eye, night vision goggles, forward-looking infrared, operations center direction, radar reports, timings, and formations. The explanation could still have been ordinary. But ordinary did not mean effortless. That was the heart of the story. The government had not released a magic answer. It had released a record that made lazy certainty look bad from both directions. The believer wanting aliens was moving faster than the evidence. The skeptic wanting nothing was moving faster than the record. The strongest reading stayed in the uncomfortable middle long enough to see what the file actually stated. And what it stated was not small. It stated that in late 2025, a senior United States intelligence official and pilots went out looking for something ordinary enough to end the question. The debris did not explain it. A cave did not explain it. Radar redirected them. Ground reports guided them. They saw lights and formations they could not identify, moving from the mountain to their helicopter to fighter aircraft and back into the official record. Then in 2026, that record was released to the public inside a much larger UAP archive. That changed the shape of the story. For years, UFO content online had lived between too much imagination and too little paperwork. This release changed that because the paperwork itself became the spectacle: official documents, official videos, official uncertainty, all on one government page. The page did not say every file was extraordinary. It said unresolved. That was smaller and better, because unresolved was where the audience could enter honestly. Viewers did not have to believe in aliens to notice when official records did not sound comfortable with their own material. The first PURSUE file did not need to end with a conclusion pretending to be a crown. It needed to end with a standard. Not aliens. And not nothing either. If this was drones, flares, aircraft, test debris, sensor error, or ordinary mistakes, then that explanation had to stand beside the details. Radar direction, ground teams, forward-looking infrared, night vision goggles, naked eye sightings, rotor disk proximity, T-formation, and orbs over fighters. That was not conspiracy thinking. That was reading the file without letting either side steal the last word. And this was only the first box. The archive had water footage, range reports, historical CIA and DOE material, sensor puzzles, and cases that might be exactly as boring as the most aggressive skeptic hoped. Kept, that would be fine. Then let them be boring after the work was done. For now, the first file left us hovering over a dark western range, low on fuel, with a senior intelligence official watching orange lights appear near the aircraft, then over fighters, then disappear back into the question. That was where the story closed. Not with the answer. With the standard the answer had to meet. Next time, the archive went from the mountains to the water. Until next time, remember that history is mostly ordinary people doing ordinary things right before the consequences arrive. The past was not wiser, just less recently embarrassed. Thanks for watching.